Words matter. Words change the tone, the frame, and behavior, and words can change practice. The adage that you've probably heard before, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, isn't really true because words can hurt, but they can also heal. So I want to welcome you to the Words Matter series, where we engage in open and authentic discussions about the impact of common terminology that's used in child serving systems with those that are directly affected by that terminology. Our goal is to illuminate how the terms we use can influence perception, approach, and practice, as well as explore alternative language or approaches as a means of intentionally shifting how we view and how we interact with youth and families and even with each other. So today we're going to be exploring the use of the term partnership. Before we begin, I'd like you to take a moment to consider something. What comes to mind when you think of partnership? We're going to have in the chat box a link to a Mentimeter poll. And if you would just respond, what comes to mind when you think of partnership? And Stephen, our tech host, is going to drop that in. There it is. And if you'll click on that link and you can respond, and then we're going to see on the screen everybody's response. Hopefully folks can get to that link. I know it takes a second. There we go. Team and collaboration. Union. Ooh, equality. I love that that's been set up. There we go. Love. Support. Genuineness. Yes. Brainstorming. Oh, Stephen, there's a big gray. There we go. There was a big gray box. Collaboration, team support. So if you're familiar with how this works, it's a word cloud. So the larger font items are the ones that more people are putting in and using. Oh, lack of authenticity. Somebody's had some experiences there. Give people another minute to respond to this. What comes to mind when you think of partnership? In the meantime, yes, definitely introduce yourself and to each other in the chat box. Mutual investment, companionship, cooperation. So it looks like our biggest ones are collaboration, support team, and cooperation. There's a story behind that lack of authenticity, dedication. Support, collaboration, yeah, it's kind of staying the same. Influence. Trust, yes. More than one. Tokenism, there's another one. Yes. Okay. Thank you for answering that and responding to that. Stephen, if you don't mind putting that one down, thank you. Okay. So let's talk about this term. Let's talk about partnership and how it impacts youth and young adults and families. We do have a great panel of discussants today. We've got Emma McGovern, who's a young adult from Wisconsin, Tanya Byington, who is a family support provider and a supervisor with the Resilience Network, and Jessica Sismilik. I was going to mess up your last name, but I went with the first one, who's a mother of 4 with experience in multiple child serving systems. So thank you all for being here and for sharing your experiences and your perspectives. We're going to start with the definition. We use and we hear the term partnership a lot in the mental health arena, particularly in systems of care and that whole work, referring to collaboration between providers or regarding an approach and treatment between youth, family, and a provider. It's defined as a relationship involving close cooperation, which is a word that popped up, between individuals or groups having specified and joint rights and responsibilities. How partnership is implemented truly varies by provider, organization, and system, and it can be minimal, like just having input into something, to more evolved, where there's shared decision-making, collaborative processes. Parents or youth and young adults may define partnership a little differently than providers or systems based on their lived experiences in services and in the child serving. So if you don't mind, let's start with Emma. From a young adult perspective, what is partnership?
Well, coming from my perspective as a young adult working in quite a few different mental health spaces, both nationally and Wisconsin-based, especially in more of governmental systems, partnership kind of stands out as a few different things to me. Primarily, it looks more like tokenism in a lot of spaces, if I'm being honest, just because a lot of the time, me being a youth, especially a youth with experience, I'm brought on to a team under the premise of partnership, but I'm treated as a token, where I'm just there to pretend like youth are actually participating on the team. But in reality, pardon?
It's a checkbox.
Yes, it is exactly a checkbox. Like, I'm there to say things or even just sit in the meeting so it looks like they care more than they actually do. But going down into like teams I've felt where I truly have a sense of like word, or what I would actually call partnership, have been I'm brought onto the team in more of an equity kind of way. Like, it's taken into account that I'm still young, I know what I'm talking about, I have experience to back me up, but I don't have as much time as a lot of the adults in this space. Like, this isn't my full-time career or my full-time job. I can't always meet at like 1 p.m. during the day because I'm in school or in class, or I have another job that's paying my bills while I'm in school.
Mhm.
And it often looks like being brought onto the team in an equity way where my words, my experience, and my opinions matter. And it's also moved around where, like, if I can't attend a 1 p.m. meeting, I'm given something to fill out my opinion later. Or they move the meeting back by like a half hour so that I can actually attend. And I'm not just a checkbox of when they can come in, they can.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're a true participant in it. You're
Yes.
you're a team member,
Yeah.
not just a checkbox. Yeah, thank you. Jessica, from a parent perspective, what does partnership mean to you?
So I can echo some of the same things that Emma has experienced, even from a young person's perspective. Um, Partnership from a parent perspective, it's still, in my lived experience, requires me to sort of be that catalyst and be that constant. And I have to really push and advocate for that partnership. I have 4 children, 3 of which have a myriad of services and providers. And I have learned that it's sort of my responsibility to communicate with all of my children's supports, all of their professionals, school supports, natural supports, to make sure that everyone has shared information and shared goals. Sometimes from a parent perspective, I do find myself a little bit frustrated if I send, in my mind, a very important message or an update to, let's say, my child's psychiatrist, and I don't hear anything back until, the next appointment that was scheduled 2 months later. However, I've learned that I can find some peace and some comfort in my ownership and my support and advocacy around sharing that information, because ultimately those providers, they do come back around. They're just very busy. And so their ability to communicate as quickly as I might want them to is not, on the same timeline as mine. But lastly, one thing I wanted to share, where I have seen sort of a success story, actually just yesterday, I was at my son's pediatrician appointment, and because of this communication that she's part of, she had stepped out, asked me to step out of my son's appointment to talk to me about something going on with my other son, which indicated to me that she is reading all this information. She does care. And she came back full circle and did it in a very professional way, with just me as the parent. And it was super helpful. And ultimately, she ended up validating, the choice that was made for my son as his caretaker. So it does take effort, consistent effort on oftentimes one person's part, but I would just say, stay encouraged that ultimately sort of that shared effort and shared space will eventually come around.
And that's a great example of partnership in action, following through and making sure that there's communication. It's heard on both sides and it's shared, around planning. Thank you for sharing that. I love what Emma put in the chat. The sheer effort it can take to be welcomed in the spaces that should already be represented. You mentioned the consistency. You have to be the one pushing every time. So that's true. Tanya, how would you define partnership in both your personal and professional experience?
So to me, partnership, when you hear about two or more people, to me, it's also about communication. That's an important part to me of that partnership. In my personal experience, when I was navigating the different systems out here, for example, the mental health system, I was always told I was the expert of my family. That was something new to me. I had never been told that before or heard that before. I thought everybody else was the experts. Of course, I was advocating, saying, this is what I need. But I didn't truly feel as if people were partnering with me because they were telling me I was the expert, but that wasn't what was being conveyed to me. Right. So it was a huge shift, too, in my own mindset of, I am the expert. Right. And so I really need to advocate it to get myself heard. I just needed somebody to sort of come in and help me understand and dig deep about that. And then just thinking about my professional experience, I am a family support partner in something called the High Fidelity Wraparound Process. And, my role is to really help parents understand what that partnership means and helping them understand they're the experts and helping the other professionals at the table understand that parents should be partnered, whether, it be, I don't want to share it in tidbits, but like having families introduce themselves, have the family sort of take leadership of meetings from the get-go. So that's just a little bit about what I think about partnership.
Thank you for sharing that. It is, there are responsibilities on both sides. As Jessica pointed out, you have to be consistent, but then on the professional side too, we have a responsibility to show what partnership looks like. So research has shown that there are better outcomes in services when youth and families are fully engaged. And providers are encouraged to fully partner with youth and families, not just in treatment, but really across the board, in developing and evaluating programs and services, in policy making, even those funding, putting money where it's going to have the best use for what works for youth and families. It's fair to say that although some strive to implement this, partnership isn't always achieved, and youth and families may feel or be affected differently when partnership is used. This is how we're going to work together, but then it's not fully implemented in their situation or in their experience. And you've kind of talked about this. It definitely showed up in the word cloud. There were a couple of things in there, but can each of you speak to what impacts you've seen or experienced based on the use of partnership and how it's implemented? But it can be in your community, with your experience, with your own work. But when it's truly happened and when it said it's going to happen and it didn't, what impacts have you seen?
So I'll go ahead and speak to that. So when it truly works, one of the points that I thought of was the importance of partnership can also include, let's say it's an identified youth, but when it truly works, it also includes any other persons in the home, to include their siblings that might be impacted by what one of the youth is going through. So an example where I've seen it's worked well is where if, let's say one of my children is having some really challenging behaviors in the home that is ultimately affecting the entire environment of the home. Also partnering with the other sibling's school, the school counselor, letting them know, hey, this is what went on last night. You might see some differences in behaviors, of these other children, and making sure to think outside of a more narrow box of partnership and the more immediate people, because it's really an umbrella term that can just continue to be stretched farther and farther. So that's an example of me seeing it work well. An example of it not working as well would just be, this is kind of a cliche answer, but I would say the opposite of what I spoke of earlier today, when I am making those efforts to share that information with a team, but really there might only be one other team member who is really listening to me and hearing me. What Tanya spoke of a few minutes ago is, the idea that we know our children best, right? So sometimes as a parent, we want to shout out to all of these providers, please listen to me, please hear what I'm saying, this is what's going on, this is how I'm feeling. And sometimes we can be shouting out for help, but only one person's really listening to you. And it can feel one person of that partnership. And it can feel very discouraging and very isolating and very lonely. And so that's where the importance of digging deep and looking beyond that, maybe that scope of professionals, and looking for natural supports or just other types of partners that can fill that need that you're looking for.
Yeah, good point. Because what happens in the home, and with your family it affects everybody. And so for there to be real partnership, when you're struggling with one child's behavior, is that others around need to understand how that impacts the other kids in the home and how it can impact their day, their academics, their ability to think straight, what if they haven't had sleep. So that's a really good point. Yeah. Emma, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump off of Jessica and add this point in because I didn't want it to get erased. Although I agree with everything you've said, Jessica, the statement that really stood out to me was the point of like, as parents, we know our children best. And I definitely don't agree with that statement. I feel like I know myself best. And just in the experience I had in my own like mental health and school journey, I didn't always want my parents there. Most of the time I didn't. My mom was a good mom and she tried her best, but like I didn't want her to have anything to do with my therapist, my psychologist, my doctor. I wanted her out of the way. I appreciated that she wanted to participate, but it was just like so many of the problems I was facing, she was adding to, and she didn't really understand how. Like that care was there, but I was still at a point in my life where I like didn't trust my mom, didn't believe her when she said that she wanted to help me. And I know that that's different now, but when I was in that space, it wasn't like I see this as my mom trying to help me. It was more like I saw this as my mom trying to get hyper involved. And then it was no longer a focus on my care and what I believed was correct. It was a focus on what my mother thought was correct for my care, or what my father thought was correct for my care. And although I agree with you, I just want to bring up that inverse of sometimes the best form of partnership looks like a parent stepping back and recognizing like, my kid's 12, but they don't super want me involved here, where I can sit on the sidelines and I can be supportive. So if something goes wrong, I can get involved, but I can recognize that my kid says this is a journey that they need to go on by themselves. And I need to be more of a silent partner rather than a super involved one. And I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want that experience to get erased, because I still think it's valid and I still think they're a great parent. I just think sometimes when we talk about a parent relationship, it's often too invasive. And sometimes we forget that although they're young and are going to be stupid, like I definitely was young and stupid and probably still am young and stupid, I still made the right choices. Like I still quit therapists when I thought they were bad and found ones that actually worked, despite the like fear or involvement of my mother. But I don't want to erase that sometimes that's what kids need, even though we want to protect them.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. Because sometimes partnership, like you said, looks different based on the perspective. You know, considering my own 15-year-old, you know, or my 22-year-old who are going through therapy, they don't want me there all the time. And I know about them. I know what we've been through. I hold a history, but you know, you bring up a really good point. I may be thinking one way and they may be thinking the other. And I don't want to negatively influence, you know, but I want them to know I care. So that's a really important point that you brought up, that partnership can look different. And it can look different even within the family, right? As you're going through that. So that's really important, a really important point to bring up. Yeah. I don't know, Jessica, if you wanted to say anything. I saw you nodding and going, yeah, you know, that's kind of true. Before we go.
Yeah, I totally appreciate the perspective, because that's how, you know, we learn and grow. You know, it's definitely food for thought. So I appreciate your experience. And I also appreciate even with that experience, you are able to still validate that, you know, your parent did do what they felt was best as well, but also show the confidence to speak up and, you know, maybe improve another child's life by sharing what you learned through your experience. So thank you so much.
So yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit to partnership. You know, I'm just thinking there's so many different partnerships that, you know, I encounter on a daily basis. I am working closely with an intensive care coordinator who I'm having to partner with. And, you know, I'm reading body language of those that I am supporting and saying, hey, we need to stop this meeting for a moment. You know, I might see a youth who, that's why I love being in person. You know, witnessing this body language and just seeing maybe a parent's arms crossed, or in my own experience, my own child's knee, like thinking it's going to fly off if they keep shaking. You know, so partnering in that and making sure that people can understand how to read that room. You know, I think as people, as peers and, you know, parents and youth of lived experience, we're pretty good at picking up what's going around the room, right? And helping the other professionals at the table understand that. I've seen where it hasn't gone well because maybe somebody isn't paying attention to that body language. And I've seen tables flipped. I've seen tiles come off of ceilings. And it's because we aren't listening to each other. We aren't being heard. I know especially our youth. My daughter will tell you, you know, I wasn't listening and I thought I was doing the best I could, but I really wasn't doing the best I thought I was. But she'll say, you weren't listening, Mom. I was there. I was present. My ears were open, but I wasn't hearing her perspective and her thought. So when I think about partnering, it goes all the way back to even my own child and sitting across from her and hearing her take. And that's why I love youth perspective, because it really does help us.
What I'm hearing from all of you guys is that it's listening and it's relationship. It's about being able to adapt if what you're doing isn't working. If what your child needs is for you not to do that. You know, if the provider needs to step back and listen and hear what you're asking for, you know, listening, adapting to what's going on and building that relationship. When it's gone well, what have been some of the outcomes? When someone's partnered well with you, whether it's on the individual level or in a work setting, you know, a professional setting, what have been the outcomes?
I can go off of that. So I'm queer, if you didn't already tell from the they, them pronouns, but I'm also pan, which means that I date lots of different people regardless of their gender. And this has proved some interesting difficulties, especially for people that are not very queer positive, where I'm kind of both a sin and why don't you just give up one half of what you date, which isn't accurate. But going off of that, in a lot of the places that I've been and have been disrespected, or I'll go into places and I'll constantly get my pronouns wrong, even though I'm politely correcting them. It definitely has taken some effort, but I've seen some positive partnerships where I'm sometimes brought on to consult or do a training, often paid for this expertise and consultant, that I can talk to them about how to change their mindsets, or where some of their practices are heteronormative or not very accessible. In particular, I've spent a lot of time helping people with forms, because oftentimes we forget that the people filling out forms don't always have parents. Like, that's a big one. Sometimes kids get abandoned, sometimes kids are orphans, sometimes kids are emancipated, and often forms don't reflect this. Like, when we talk about university forms, oftentimes there's a line for parent or guardian, but if you're over the age of 18, you no longer have a parent and or guardian sometimes. We forget about that. We also forget on hospital forms that there isn't a place for you to put your pronouns. So if your pronouns aren't typical, then you just have to write on the page and hope that it ends up somewhere. Or you can have the joy of me constantly telling Mayo Clinic, which I will call them out for, my name is not McGovern. Keep calling me McGovern. I get mail that says McGovern, because they don't have it set up in their system to handle somebody who just wants to be called by their last name. And the positive partnerships I've seen where I talk to them about these issues, they actually start to spark change, where it's not just on me to tell them, hey, you're doing this wrong. Hey, I noticed this. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you tried this training? It's been taken in where I've told you this kind of information once, I've directed you towards trainings, and then that partnership ends, but they still take that information and effort to continue after I've left. Like, the partnership doesn't have to be you just learn stuff while you're with me. You take what you've learned and you change things in the long run, which I think is a big part of partnership on success that I want to put here, because most of the time when we're partnered with something, it's not forever. And it's really important that we recognize that not only did it work with this relationship, not only did it work to improve this, but it'll also keep improving in the long run if I can stick with these concepts. Like, I should get training every year. Like, we shouldn't just keep putting it off. It doesn't always have to be a boring one where we sit through a very long presentation, but the importance of recognizing that we can't just talk about race whenever there is a giant protest. We can't just talk about LGBTQIA plus rights when it's Pride Month. We can't just talk about women's rights when laws are made that shouldn't have been made in the first place. Like, it's a long process that we constantly have to think about and we constantly have to be aware of. And when we have somebody who challenges those ideas, it's important for us to continue challenging those ideas even after they leave. And I am getting a phone call. 1 second here. Let me just end that. Those are my main points, though.
Yes, so it has to be intentional. And learning happens. If it's truly a successful partnership, does that change how you perceive the other person? Does it change your relationship with them when they do those things? When they recognize your, they hear what you're saying and they practice and they change? Does that build your trust with them?
Sometimes. sometimes, if I'm being honest, oftentimes if you screw up my pronouns, even if you correct it, or you say something that isn't very culturally informed, it's not so much that my trust is broken, but it's more like my trust in your education and your ability to continuously do the right thing is a little damaged, because I'm thinking, like, you didn't know this. This is kind of like a big thing of the 21st century. So you
Mhm.
either aren't in a lot of spaces, or you've purposely been avoiding education on this topic, or you believe that people like me aren't enough in your life to actually learn stuff about.
Mhm.
So I would say that the trust building, unlike the respect, probably comes from like getting the certification. Like, I know I have a mentor in my life that is like one of my favorite mentors, because I went on a trip when I was about 13 and got called some queer slurs that I won't say on Facebook, but they also made jokes for me to like kill myself because I was queer while I was sleeping next to them on the bus. And it was a horrible experience. And later, like years later, when I ran into her, I had known her, but when she saw that like she had an ally training, like an
Mhm.
in-depth ally training with a certification, with an expiration date, when she had taken it, with her full name, and I could recognize that she had actually put in the effort and the work. It wasn't just something that she called herself. That's when I trusted her, and that's when I told her about everything that happened, and stuff got changed. So I would say it's more not just that you immediately correct it, but like you got to have the years of the certifications to your name. Even for youth, we still need to be able to tell that you're actually educated on this topic to trust you on this topic.
Mhm. And you're putting in the effort to
Yeah.
learn. Yes.
I would also say
Thank you.
visible effort to learn. Like, just because you read a book doesn't mean I'm going to be able to tell that you read that book.
Mhm. Yes. Actions have to match up. Thank you. Jessica, Tanya, from parent perspective, what what are the outcomes if partnership is done well for your child, for you, for your work relationships, even the collaborations?
One example, again, from a parent perspective where partnerships has gone well, was partnering. Well, I'd spent 2 years in IEP meetings, really trying to relay to the school team the need for my son to be in a private day school because of some of his behaviors, that it wasn't fair to the teachers, that it wasn't fair to the other classmates, that it wasn't fair to the school staff, you know, everyone involved with just trying to keep him in school and the other children safe and the teachers safe. Despite literally this 2 years of effort to request that, it wasn't until the school liaison at the residential treatment facility that he was at who made that same request based on the behaviors she had observed in his school setting at the residential placement, that request was actually finally granted for him to go to that private day setting. So it was a little bit frustrating from a parent perspective of thinking, well, I've been asking this same thing for 2 years. Why didn't anybody listen? But then, you know, partnering is about partnering with the best people or the most educated people, or for lack of a better word, the right people for your team. And sometimes it takes time to find that, you know, the best team member for that phase that you're going through in your life. And so I kind of rephrased it, and, you know, didn't personalize it is, why isn't anybody listening to me? Instead, hey, here's this partner I have on my team. They came to my team at the right time. And now we can start to see these changes. One of the things that you talked about was, you know, the importance of having the right partners and things like that. And Tanya had mentioned the high fidelity wraparound that training. One of the things, the mottos sort of that I learned in that training is that families don't fail, but plans fail families. And that has really been instrumental in reminding myself through my personal experience or others that, we're not always going to get it right the first time. And it's sort of like an ever evolving, constantly changing thing. And you just try something. And if it doesn't work, you try something new and just keep going. And that perseverance, it always pays off.
Thank you. Tanya.
Yeah, I know you guys will probably get tired of hearing the high fidelity wraparound, but it's because it's what brought me to my work as a peer support worker. So I'm very passionate about the process. And I'm just thinking of my lived experience in going through that process. It was really building that team around my family. And just like Jessica shared, it's about wrapping around the whole family and empowering us. So this process, showed that everybody was willing to show up for us. They really were putting us in that driver's seat, and it was something that had never happened before. And they all, it was a team, but that's partnership, right? And, we had more than 2 people there. But what happened was they heard me. They would acknowledge, I hear you. I hear you. And it was just nice to, those 2 little words or 3 words, sorry, my math is not my strength. I hear you was so powerful to me because I was knocking on doors and it didn't feel like we were being heard. And I was able to then leave that process, graduate from that process, transition, and become a peer support worker and do this work now. And where I saw that it worked, you wanted an example of where it worked, that partnership of watching a parent who has, and I can share this because she's given me permission and is brought to me to where I am, who has been involved in many, many systems from when she was a little girl, taken from her mother, and empowering her and giving her and her family a voice. And watching her go from the small, infested, moldy apartment to now living in a 3-level townhouse, having income, having a job, no longer involved with many of the systems she was once involved with. But that's because we let her know we are here to partner with you. We are here to support you and to help your voice be heard. Reminding all those professionals that kept trying to close that door on her, like holding that door open so that she could step her foot through, and them seeing her trying. And every time they knocked her down, she got back up and she kept fighting. So that's where I've seen where it has worked well. And I think it's a testament to this work that we bring our voice to.
So when partnership is done well, there's change. Right? We have kids, we have parents that begin to get their needs met, and there's equity at the table and sharing and persistence and support. And then there's change in practice and in behavior when we all are open to that and we recognize that partnership is a give and take. So, it's a listening, it's an intentional, consistent. So that all of you have talked about that. So we've got a lot of people, listening, and there's some people remarking in the chat box and that sort of thing. Are there any actions or approaches or strategies that you would say to them that would show and exemplify partnership? What's something that others can do? You said listen. What's something that others can do that would show you that they truly are committed to being?
Jumping in real quick off of what you said on the last question, Millie, I just wanted to bring up, besides just change, we're also shifting the burden. Like the burden shouldn't just be placed on the youth. The burden shouldn't just be placed on the parent or the caregiver of like professional space to be handling all of this. And I definitely know in even the stories I've just heard without having been in this field for tons of years, that we definitely have a huge problem with people feeling like they're fighting the fight alone. And I think how important it is to have that open, honest communication where we're sharing the burden of this care or sharing the burden of the failures of this system as a team, rather than feeling like we're fighting this alone or even fighting each other. I just wanted to add that onto the end.
Well, that's the definition. It's joint rights and joint responsibility. That's what partnership is supposed to be. Yeah. Is there anything that you guys would suggest to people? Anything more than what you already have, because you've already pointed out a number of wonderful strategies.
I think a big thing for me is timely communication. I think that is so hard to come by nowadays. And it goes along with the whole being heard, or even in timely communication, something as simple as, I've received your email and I'll, respond to you within 48 hours. Some kind of acknowledgement saying, I heard you, instead of it just being, lost and you never knowing if you will hear back.
Mm-hmm. I would 100% agree with that. Just some type of acknowledgement. Yeah. Are there others? There's one thing you could suggest that people do?
I'd say probably looking long and hard at the processes you currently have in place. Like Jessica said, with the communication piece, like especially in today's world, like my inbox already probably has 20 new emails from the span that I was in this meeting. So the importance of looking at like, how are we communicating with each other? When are we communicating with each other? When are we placing these meetings? Are we placing these meetings during like a youth's favorite class? Like looking at those pieces of like how, when, where, and why do these things happen? And then looking at our team and if our team actually responds to this in the best way, or if maybe we need to like leave work early on Thursday so we can have a Saturday morning meeting. Or maybe we need to recognize that people have so many emails going into their inbox that maybe we need to shift to a different app for communication. And like, there are millions upon millions at this point that although it might be a little bit of a learning curve, if it makes it easier for the team to communicate, then like make that change. And I think that's the biggest piece for me. Like looking at how does this team feel, even those small problems are, and why is it like we're sending emails to each other? Why are we not sending text messages? Do we need to meet in person? Could we meet online? Would that be easier for the team? All of those like little kind of pieces where if one person took the lead to talk about this and add it to the agenda, it really could change the pressure that people feel, or the lack of communication, or the frustration with like, I don't want to attend this meeting right now. I want to attend this meeting some other time. And also putting a recognition on like, parents have a lot going on, youth have a lot going on, caregivers and professionals have a lot going on. And sometimes we need to change that so it's not so much on their plate every single hour of every single day.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. Tanya?
I was just going to say follow through, I think is important too. Don't say you're going to do something and not follow through and have to have me as a parent follow up with you. Like, I'm doing enough work. That's not one more thing. If you're saying you're going to do it, then please do it. One thing that I just what Emma just shared was having one thing that we do in our meetings, having our calendars open. So our next meeting we are setting, I was sitting with the youth this morning, and this youth said, I missed the singing part of my class today. And I'm just thinking, we had all planned around this meeting. Like, we really want you to tell us. We do not want you to miss something so fun because, life's hard. We don't want you to miss these things. So we all opened our calendars this morning, determined if it was an A day or B day. That's how our high schools work here. And all came to an agreement. So we don't have to worry about emails going back and forth. We don't have to worry about text messages or phone calls. Like, let's set our next month's schedule right now. And if something comes up, just let us know, because we don't want you to miss those important things.
Mhm.
And for those who may be listening to me, one thing that I believe in preparing families for any meeting, any setting, no matter what that is. Because while I may have sat through these meetings, my peer that is sitting across from me they might not know what an IEP is. They might not know what a meeting looks like. I'm very visual. So if that might mean explaining what the room looks like, or explaining who's going to be showing up in the rectangles, but really preparing. And then something that I have a soapbox about, just you're asking, I could go on and on and on, is that if you are in person, one of my things, like think trauma informed, let the family sit first if able. Let the family decide. I will never walk in front of a youth or a family ever into a room. I want them to place themselves and be able to put themselves in a space that they feel comfortable enough to sit at that table with the other professionals in the room. So that's just some of the tidbits I like to share.
Yeah, those are good. Those are all good. I would just add that if you say you're going to do something and for some reason you can't, it goes back to the communication. Let me know that you're unable to do it. I mean, we can't, something may come up, but let me know. It's still acknowledging, and communication. Thank you, all three of you. This has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your expertise with us today. We do have a few more minutes. I would like to do another poll here at the end, but first, because we do have about 13 minutes, I just wanted to see if there was anyone who has joined us today that has a question or a comment for any of our discussants today, because we do have a few minutes, and this is a very important topic. And if you don't, that's okay as well. But I'm going to give you a second here.
How y'all doing? So I'll go ahead and say something. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, again, thank you.
Okay. I'm Ty, and I work for Club Fear. I'm a program director. I service youth 12 to 17, and I love what you said earlier about how they said sticks and stones break my bones, words never hurt, but words do hurt and they do matter. And so I always try to encourage, even becoming more mindful of what I say. How I say things, even as a parent. I have all boys, so I'm learning to be even more mindful of how I even talk to them, because I have some memories of some things that were said to me that it still hurts. You know what I mean? Well, I'm healed from it, but I remember at the time that hurt me. But I also wanted to say you guys shared a lot of good stuff. The only other thing I think I would add additional to when you were talking about partnerships were when they work. I see them continuing on, and also that you would refer them to others. It would be a good way to get them connected to other people. Like when they're a good resource, then you would refer them. That's what I would say. Something good comes out of the partnerships, because it is all about listening and learning. And then we all have a lane. What can we do? Because we can't do everything, but when we know our lane, then we can assist. So that's what I think about when I think about partnerships: listening, assisting, and togetherness. Because without that, you got to remember the common things that you're there for. And, it's not about the takeover. That's why I said find out what your lane is and flow in your lane. But just wanted to share that, because partnerships are very good. Like it can make things go very smooth. And I love when Emma was talking about, because I can recall when I was a youth, that I would get called on to come up and speak at different meetings. I would be that youth advocate, or the one that they would come to and ask me what I thought and things like that. But yeah, it did seem like just a checkbox at that time. But just to encourage you that, what you say matters, and thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing up. Thank y'all for the opportunity to share as well.
Thank you, Ty. Appreciate that. Anyone else before we move on to our final piece here? Okay, well, again, thank you, Emma, Tanya, and Jessica. Thank you, McGovern, Tanya, and Jessica, for sharing your experiences, your expertise. I would like everybody to think again about their initial perceptions and their thoughts about partnership, and to consider what you've heard and learned during today's discussion. We're going to do another Menti poll, and Stephen's going to drop that in the chat box. But the question is, what are some of the things that you're committed to doing within your role to impact how partnership is implemented, how you approach and how you fulfill partnership? So use that link, and we will see on the screen. There we go. What are some of the things that you are committed to doing? And as people respond, they're going to scroll across, listen and hear. Yeah, that's one of the things that came across as to this. Listen, communication, not picking tokens. Communicate, yeah. Be willing to learn, be open. It's not just a checkbox. Be authentic, because we can tell when you're not. Be respectful. Stephen, can you move the screen up just a little bit? I can see the other ones. You should be able just to kind of scroll up and down. There we go. Ask thoughts and opinions, schedule meetings at times convenient, commit to show up and do my part. Respect to make decisions, communicate, educate and encourage staff, be mindful of words, be the building block for trust. That was pointed out. It's not just one thing, more than one thing that gets you there. Accountability is absolutely important. I see that in the chat. See, there's more support, openness. Become part of my practice. I like that. Oh, I love Hawaii. Live aloha, be aloha. Hold myself accountable. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Okay. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we hope that you'll also join us next month. We're going to explore the use of the term equity. In closing, we challenge you to be intentional in using terms that are more supportive and respectful of the youth and family experience and their expertise. So thank you again, and remember that words matter. Have a good day.